Pregnancy resource centers are the backbone of the entire pro-life movement. And one of my favorite pregnancy help centers is Thrive Nation out of St. Louis. Thrive Nation is a Christ-centered organization that empowers women and men to make life-affirming and healthy decisions about sex, pregnancy, and relationships. They've been in operation for 37 years, almost as long as I have been alive, and over the last several years has become one of the most strategically recognized leaders in the pregnancy resource movement. Hey Pro-Life Gen, I'm Kristan Hawkins. Welcome to this special episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. I am so honored you finally get to meet my friend, Bridget VanMeans. Bridget is the firebrand president and vision leader of Thrive Nation. She's also the catalyst of what is called Missouri Miracle, how Missouri is now an abortion-free state, achieving that in partnership with several state leaders in October 2019. She has been leading Thrive Nation for a number of years with a very clear mandate to rapidly expand Missouri's victory to states across the nation. Her team has developed time and time again stunning innovations and marketing and very bold vision and unique ability to deliver results that show that Thrive can be a true counterbrand to Planned Parenthood. So Bridget, thank you so much for coming on today and for all that you do there at Thrive. I am so honored to have you on.
I am super excited about spending some time with you and the Pro-Life Gen. I just love you. I just had said to you, you guys are our tribe. I was there for your conference in January for the March for Life, and I settled in with those wild, exciting young people, and I was like, this is where I want to hang out moving forward. You guys are awesome. I love your energy. I love your perspective.
They are way cooler than me, Bridget. But this is why it's so important to have you on the podcast, is because so many of our student leaders and graduates and alumni students, when I ask them, like, what do you want to do to continue to serve in the pro-life movement beyond your campus years? The number one thing is get involved in the pregnancy resource movement. And young people are always looking for, what is the most effective way, what are the most effective pregnancy centers out there across the country to model so they themselves can start their own ministries. And we also have a lot of pregnancy center leaders, board of member directors who listen to the podcast, who also want to hear the same thing of what are the other innovations happening in this movement that, we can consider or we can, adapt for our center. So that's why I love having innovative leaders on, because I think the wisdom that you'll be able to share with us today can then be applied across the country and hopefully multiply our efforts. So I guess the first question I want to start with today is there are so many more life-affirming pregnancy centers across the country than there are abortion facilities. How come more people just don't know about all that we do as the pro-life movement?
Yeah, that is it's a great question, and then I think it's multi-pronged as well. So
Sure.
A really interesting data point, right? Over 2,000, that's what you're alluding to, over 2,000 pregnancy resource centers here in the country, and really pregnancy resource centers just were very prolific in the last decade, and then we've seen abortion clinics closing all over the nation because of the work that you do and other national leaders, as well as those on the front lines, 40 Days for Life. So there really has been this posture change, right? Mm-hmm. Way more pregnancy centers than abortion clinics. So of course the obvious, and we never get tired of whining quite a bit about the mainstream media, right? And Planned Parenthood in the abortion industry are the darlings of the mainstream media. So they get a lot of free earned media. So that's the obvious. And of course our good works are suppressed. But let's put that past us because we can't do anything about that. Let's talk about what we can do. So what's the way to get the word out about what we do? And that is, it's an age-old principle. It's called advertising and marketing. And Kristan, that's something you're very good at. You've got a strong social media presence. You've got the vibe and the energy. And you guys have reached your generation. But imagine if you hadn't captured social media as an important platform. So you've got great marketing. You have a really appealing voice. You figured out who your target was, and you speak in their language. What happens in the Pregnancy Resource Center movement is that the works themselves are magnificent. I'm sure you've been to so many centers, and so you know that the centers are beautiful. The people are fresh-faced and positive and future-forward. Very sacrificial, professional, more and more professional every day, and yet mostly unknown, right? Not really moving that needle in their city in terms of the number of women that they are reaching. And the problem is that they're taking that product that they have, and unlike you, who has taken what you do and pointed it towards a specific group of people in a way that is meaningful to them, a lot of times what happens is the pregnancy resource centers are they're really taking their interior life and then using that in the way they communicate. So you've got a girl who may or may not be a Christian, most of the time is, which most people don't like that data point, but you and I both know it happens to be a fact. But at the point of her thinking about having an abortion, because that's who we're really trying to reach, is the abortion-determined girl, the abortion-minded girl, the one who's going to have an abortion or is looking for one, she has already addressed her spiritual qualms and interior conflicts. She is in a state of denial. Yeah. She has been programmed for a couple of decades that this decision is actually a women's health decision. She has also been programmed that this is a matter of choice for her. She is now even being told by some pastors, fringe pastors and even so-called priests, that abortion is something that God sanctions. So in other words, she's been put into a very particular mindset. But then we're talking to her from kind of a faith-based, morality-based template. Mm-hmm. But that faith-based, morality-based template is not going to connect with her at that stage in her decision-making process. It can work. For instance, when we're together at your conferences, Kristan, we have an opportunity to really shape strong values, strong principles, and even give them tools to defend it. But if she's gotten now to the point that she's about to have an abortion, she's already told herself a whole lot of things that are not going to be pushed back by the moral argument. She's in a fight or flight state. Adrenaline is running. She's not thinking reasonably. So what we really have to do is we have to appeal to her from her mindset. And so her mindset is choice. She needs to feel that her choice is being honored. She needs to feel that her autonomy is being respected. She does not want to feel judged. She may already have some internal judgment going on. She doesn't want that coming externally. And then we also have to be willing to step into that women's healthcare arena. So again, two things. She believes it's her choice at that point. And then the second thing is she's telling herself it's a healthcare choice. So if we're moving towards her, for instance, with a name like Pregnancy Support Center, and the very thing that she wants most in the world that day is to be unpregnant, then that connection point is not going to happen. And so what you see, Kristan, is very well-intentioned, passionate, skilled people who are simply missing the marketing and branding aspect of what they do. So that's what Thrive has been able to do is really master our talking points and master our brand and our advertising. The fact of the matter is, if you can meet her from a women's healthcare context, which is very credible, by the way, we tend to listen to our doctors and nurses. If we can celebrate the fact and honor and respect the fact that it is her choice, the fact of the matter is that the laws have given this to her as a choice. God even says, I set before you life and death. I adjure you to choose life, but it's a choice. And she does have free will. So we find that as we celebrate that odd sense of autonomy, that we step into the women's health care aspect of her need, and then we create a safe space that doesn't at all inflict upon her our own personal views, which are very, very clear. What we find is that 80 to 90% of the time when you merge science with a compassionate, non-judgmental environment, you start telling her about what the different abortion procedures are. And then, of course, you and I both know the magic of the ultrasound image. When she sees that ultrasound image and then you put these other things together, her humanity rises up. And about 80 to 90% of the time, without us ever making her feel guilty or ashamed, she will choose life for that child. It's quite remarkable.
Is that would you say that's kind of the secret sauce of Thrive Nation? That, that marketing know-how of getting out to her, bringing her in, using words that she is already hearing from the abortion industry, and then bringing science and compassion together when she gets in the door?
Yes, that's certainly a big part of it. We have many people that come in and analyze our product and analyze our outputs because they're quite remarkable. We're the only evidence-based, proven counter brand to Planned Parenthood. So the first thing you will notice right away is the advertising. And so, yes, we're using language that they're comfortable with. And we also are everywhere. So she is seeing, by the time she becomes pregnant, she's heard of the Thrive brand thousands of times, and she's heard it in this context of choice and women's health care. And then everything is modern and bright and kind of looks like Lululemon ads or Sephora or all of the different brands that she feels comfortable with. So that's absolutely very important. But here's the other thing. Once you attract that abortion-determined girl, so she comes to us, she's doing a Google search. Of course, we're very aggressive, so we're in the top 3. We're usually directly above or directly below Planned Parenthood, always sandwiching them. Once you attract her, then you also have to have the skill set to move her through that decision-making process. So there is no one that's more pro-choice than a girl who has already set her appointment for Planned Parenthood and is coming to us for an ultrasound image that she thinks she's going to walk out with and take to Planned Parenthood for her abortion because our state is informed consent. So it is really important. We've spent thousands and thousands of hours developing the talking points and the patient care continuum that really supports her coming to that choice of life, because it can be intimidating. Yeah. You've got a girl sitting across from you that's looking you dead in the eye and she's telling you she's killing her baby and there's nothing you're going to say about that. And us realizing that the last thing we can do, everything inside of us, Kristan wants to throw ourselves at her feet and beg her not to have an abortion. And we have to harness all of that emotion and have the discipline to take her through a positive, comprehensive patient care experience and trust that God is going to be moving through that, even though we want to break down in tears often.
Yeah. It's the hardest work I think there is in the pro-life movement. What are some of those outputs you said you all are actually measuring to prove the success that you're having?
Well, it was really exciting. It began with goals, and I know you're very goal-oriented, but it began with this goal, and it came out of actually a spiritual encounter. I had a weekend retreat, and from that retreat, I believe that I heard the voice of the Lord saying that he wanted to do something unique and special in Missouri, and that he wanted to prove that he could do something that everyone said was impossible, and that we could be the first abortion-free state. And so that sounds very spiritual, but that can be broken down into data points, right? Because what that would mean is that abortions are no longer occurring in the state. And at that time, we had 2 handfuls of abortion clinics and well over 10,000 abortions a year. So it was going to be easily measured as to whether that was happening or not.
Yeah.
And so the outputs were that we began to track over, and we worked with groups. We worked with Sean Carney and David B. Wright, and others started coming in and saying, that sounds like a pretty lofty goal. We've never heard that before. We're going to come in and help you. And so one of the things that Sean Carney had told us was that if we could see a reduction in abortion of about 50%, that would actually drive Planned Parenthood into kind of a free fall, a demise, so to speak. So that began to be our first target, Kristan, was working with pro-life, life-affirming lawmakers, and then also developing a model that we thought could earn the business away from Planned Parenthood and bring them into our centers. So the goal then was to actually see rapid reduction in the number of abortions that Planned Parenthood was doing. But in order for it to really work, you also had to begin to see the girls coming into our centers. And that's exactly what happened. We worked with our life-affirming lawmakers. We love pro-life legislation. We really believe in it. But then we also worked in a very robust model that could actually earn that girl's business, so to speak, away from Planned Parenthood and into our centers. So we have a pretty famous bar graph now. You may have seen it, where you can see Planned Parenthood's numbers going like this and Thrive's numbers going like this.
Wow.
And so we're able to very easily track this actual conversion from a very pro-choice state to a pro-life state.
Were you, I think part of that was you guys began partnering with the Coalition for Life there on the ground in St. Louis and the sidewalk counseling efforts, because you all had a bus parked in front of or across the street from the big Planned Parenthood facility, Planned Parenthood abortion facility that used to be there in St. Louis. Is that right?
So yes, one of the big breakthroughs that we had was we were observing sidewalk counseling occurring. And this was really at the beginning of Brian and Coalition for Life's work. And we saw beautifully well-intentioned people, not a lot of turnarounds.
Yeah.
So we decided that we would begin to bring the mobile unit right down to the abortion clinic. And then we also shared with Brian the talking points that we use. And what we had learned was if we took the focus off of the morality question and we put the focus on resources and finances, that we could get many, many turnarounds. I also recommended that they start using traffic vests, because one of the things I've noticed is people with traffic vests seem to have a very unusual degree of authority.
Yes, they have a lot of power.
They tell you to do. It's like, it doesn't matter. It could be a serial murderer, but they've got a traffic vest on. If they tell you to go around the building, you do it.
That's actually pretty scary. Yes. Yes.
Yes, right? It's like, I don't know, but you've got a traffic vest on, so you must be credible. So we actually went out and bought Coalition for Life sidewalks, 40 Days for Life, bright orange traffic vests, and gave them some clipboards. I said, I think if you have a clipboard and you look like you're signing people in, clipboards and traffic vests.
I had no idea that was all your brainchild.
Yeah. And so we met with Brian and we made those recommendations, and we created some check-in here signs, and really made that strong recommendation that they're going into Planned Parenthood and they're about to spend money on their testing and the ultrasound and all of these things, but they can get those things free on the mobile unit. And man, we started seeing the numbers began to change drastically. So prior to Brian's work, we would typically see maybe a handful of turnarounds a year. Suddenly Brian and his team are down there implementing these innovations, and we're seeing that many turnarounds in a day.
Wow.
So it really was a game changer. And, even psychologically, it really started getting to the staff there, because they had just never seen anything that could interrupt their constant flow. And so there was a psychological factor to it as well.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, I just saw that in Illinois, so in Springfield, they just passed this terrible law targeting pregnancy centers in Illinois, which, the pregnancy center, the abortion facilities in St. Louis have relocated across the border in Illinois. And Brian Westbrook and the Coalition for Life has taken that sidewalk counseling model over to Illinois. And this law is like so vague. It basically says anyone can make a complaint to the AG. The Attorney General can fine the pregnancy center up to $50,000 for, quote, deceptive and manipulative practices, end quote. But there's no description of what deceptive and manipulative practices are, even though after a FOIA complaint, 0 complaints have been filed against PRCs in the past 10 years in the entire state of Illinois, like 0 complaints. But one of the things I saw in the news article was the vest. That vest was brought up in the hearing.
Yeah, because it's effective. Yeah.
But it's not even a pregnancy center. Those are just sidewalk counselors. So what, you're going to try to sue sidewalk counselors now? Like, they don't even understand how our movement works. Like, they need to be listening to my podcast more. Like, it's not even it's a sidewalk counseling group. It's not a pregnancy. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Right. Yeah. They're just kind of throwing anything they can at the side of the barn and trying to stop it. And of course, this is what we're talking about, free speech here. That's how we ended up turning back that law here in St. Louis. We actually asked Elvita King to make an appeal and just say, if you had had a buffer zone when my uncle, Martin Luther King, was fighting for civil rights, where would we be today? And so we really had a lot of effectiveness with more of our liberal aldermen at the time, because we appealed to this idea of that buffer zone is anti-constitutional and everyone has a right to freedom of speech.
I've been out from that Planned Parenthood many
So-
times. So you guys have done something that's just incredible there in Missouri. I guess, what do you think? You said something I want to hit on in a second, but what do you think has been the most effective innovation you all have made at Thrive? That is it truly in the marketing space? Is it digital? Is it the partnership with the local, sidewalk advocates? Just give me one.
Yeah, the single most important pivot that the entire movement will need to make is the pivot to women and their health. So once we removed the Pregnancy Resource Center subtitle and we went to Thrive, which is an affirming modern brand, women's healthcare, that was the beginning of the huge turnaround. And then, of course, all of the things that follow, because you have to have services that support that. But that pivot to the woman, because Pregnancy Resource Center is focused on the baby. Women's healthcare is focused on the woman. And guess what? She's the one who's making the choice. She's making the decision. So we want to focus on what her needs are and what her mindset is. And if I had to pick one, because as you know, there are a few, but if I had to pick one, that's it.
I love that, because that's always try to get to. Like, what was that? The change mechanism. And it sounds like that was really your change mechanism. I guess something else I want to hit on that you said at the very beginning of this interview, and sometimes I say the opposite. So I want to get your thoughts on this. And it's a little different. Our audiences are different. You're talking to a woman in crisis pregnancy. I'm talking to general college students making their mind up about abortion. Is this option that women have choice? And that because if somebody says, well, a woman has a choice to choose abortion, I will often say, and I think many pro-life advocates will say, no, she doesn't. No one has the choice to choose to end the life of an inconvenient child. You shouldn't have that choice. It should not be a legal choice that you can make.
Yes,
but you're not using that phraseology. You're saying, no, you do have the choice. You're quoting scripture saying, you have the choice between life and death. What are you going to choose? Do you want to break that down a little bit? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Should I stop saying that?
No, because we agree. Just, it's easy for me because I'm a woman of color. I can quickly grab the idea of, should slavery have been a choice? Should those slave owners have been walking around and going, I have a choice. I have a choice. So of course I feel that they shouldn't have a choice.
Yep.
And we know that these children are not a choice, but what we're talking about is what you're doing is exactly right, because you're equipping activists and future choosers in the time in their life where you're able to shape value and ignite values and principles and give them a backbone. So that's important. But the distinction is, the reality is there's the moral choice, and it should not be a choice. But then there's also the practicality. And when a person is in fight or flight mode, which is the girl who is experiencing a pregnancy that she perceives as a crisis, as an actual threat to her life, when she's in that mode, the morality narrative is typically not going to be as effective as meeting her in her practical narrative. And her practical narrative is she has a choice. If she doesn't have it here in Missouri, she can drive across the bridge and she's got a choice. So if I move at her and say, you don't have a choice, it immediately shuts down our opportunity for rescue. So we're both saying and believing the same thing. We're just kind of coming at it at a different angle because our job in the kingdom is a little different.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page. We are. I guess one of the questions I have listening and just researching all that you're doing at Thrive, this women's healthcare center, I guess a natural question is, where the hell did all the feminists go? Like, where are the feminists in this fight? Are they signing up to volunteer at Thrive because they want to empower women?
Yeah, well, we believe that we're starting to raise up that generation, but that's what's so exciting for you guys, because what's happened is the other side has hijacked language and hijacked ideology. Like, one of the things I've always said is, isn't it astounding that our opposition can make the murder of a child sound more benevolent than the rescuing of one? That's stunning. That is stunning magic. That is stunning smoke and mirrors, as they say, to make us sound like we're the hostile, uncaring ones, and they're the benevolent ones. So they've hijacked the idea of feminism. They've hijacked the idea of choice. They've hijacked the idea of autonomy. They've hijacked the idea of women's empowerment. And those are things that we have the right. And in this case, not only do we have the moral right, but I feel, we have the right. We have God at our back saying, this is truth.
Yeah.
I mean, where did I first experience, a man treating a woman with respect? Because it certainly wasn't on the other side of this conversation. It was on this side. So as we become more pro-woman, that will naturally attract more authentic feminists. What we have to stop doing is letting the other side lie about who we are and what we do. We are not misogynist, elderly white males. There are plenty of elderly white males in the movement, and they write big checks, and they're awesome.
We love elderly white men.
Never met one that was a misogynist. And you know what else, Kristan? Never met one that was a racist.
No.
One of our biggest donors is a 75-year-old, Euro-American male, writes big checks, knows full well that 60% of these babies are Black babies being born to Black women, and feels, passionate about that cause. So as we begin to redefine, I think, and not allow there are times and places for things. So Kristan, there are times where we're going to be very political because pro-life legislation is right legislation. It is God's legislation. It is essential. We couldn't just have Harriet Tubman, right? Rescuing one at a time. We had to have the laws that said this is what's right. So there's a time and place for that. But there's also a time and place for meeting a woman in her crisis and recognizing that her situation in her eyes is both dire and complex. And we are willing to step into that situation with her, and we are willing to have a complex conversation with her and acknowledge the situation that she's in, and acknowledge that, of course, she does have a choice, and not inflect our own personal moral views. In that moment, there's time for that. But in that moment, what she really needs is that good Samaritan to come alongside her and help her see a way.
Yeah.
When we provide these provisions for her and we show her what the resources are. And, the thing, Kristan, I'm seeing in the last year or two, which I didn't see as much before, each of our girls fills out a survey after she's had service. That's also to protect us from lawsuits. So we can't be accused of being, pro-life, judgmental manipulators. So she fills out a free will survey. I'm seeing the word safe over and over again. I didn't see that as much a couple of years ago. So they're valuing this sense of safety because the world is no longer safe for them. And they're quantifying that. So when I can help her feel safe and I can help her feel valued, Kristan, she begins to make safe, valuable choices. Isn't that cool? So as we treat her as though she's worthy, as we treat her as though she's valuable, she rises to the level and begins to make worthy, valuable decisions. And in that moment, that's really where we need to be. So it's both of those things.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And how smart to do that kind of survey after she receives her services at Thrive to get her, initial reaction. Because I think sadly in these ages, you actually have to be thinking about future lawsuits at any moment from anyone.
Yeah, any accusation.
What else do you think in terms of, this Missouri miracle of transforming this state? It's so exciting to be following. I remember years and years ago, this meeting of state pro-life leaders in Missouri and this ongoing coalition. And the goal was to rid the state of abortion.
Tina was there.
Yeah, you were there. Yeah, I mean, that's where we met you. That's where I came into contact with Thrive. And, I've been out the Planned Parenthood there with rallies over the years. What can the rest of the United States or other pro-life leaders in other states learn from what happened in Missouri. I have some feelings, but I want to know from your perspective, what do you wish other states would pick up from that unity that you all inspired?
Well, unity is an important goal. And how do I think we achieve that if we just make sure that we understand that each person and each group is bringing an important value, right? And not trying to rank. This is more important than that. So if you promote that kind of culture, but even our lawmakers have adopted pro-woman talking points. So what we have found is that no matter what bill we're posturing, there is a pro-woman benefit within that law. There isn't anything that we want to do that isn't in some way protecting women. We know that, right? Because we know abortion hurts women. So it wouldn't matter what law it is that we're looking to implement that would reduce abortion. Underneath that story is a way to protect a woman. And so we are severely disciplined around extracting the pro-woman story out of everything that we do. So even our lawmakers will go at, a typical pro-life piece of legislation that we love, and will still over and over again tell the story, whether it's about keeping women safe, making sure that they have all their choices. This authentic choice modality that we've been using has been very powerful, and we've used it in media, and most of the time they won't run me because it is so weaponized. Because what I'll say is authentic choice, we have a passion and we have a quest to make sure that every woman facing a pregnancy that she perceives as a threat to her future is granted authentic choice. That simply means she has the right to understand all of the resources that are at her fingertips, and that there are people of goodwill who are willing to help her if she chooses motherhood. And that no woman should ever feel as though she has to have an abortion because she has no choice. And so that message, again, of the authentic choice, putting the woman first, I like to do back engineering. So we know that Roe v. Wade was passed as a way to supposedly protect women in desperate situations. So if we know that that's where it began, it's absolutely certain that that's where it's going to end. So they make the case, we have to have abortion because it's protecting this woman who's been raped. Very difficult situation, very complex. Or the young person who's been in a terrible situation. Those are absolutely desperate.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. Those are desperate scenarios. But we also know that there are life-affirming choices that can be made. And we know that, God has provided many heroes that tell those stories, whether it's products of rape and things like that. I've had the honor of, I served a young lady who was the victim of incest, which is a difficult subject, but she loves her son very much, and she's very grateful that she chose life. And so we just want to make sure that we're offering women true, authentic choice, which is true feminism. And then we leave the choice to her.
Have you ever met a woman who conceived a child out of sexual assault, out of incest, that regretted choosing life for her child?
I have not. It's a great converse question. I have never met any woman who has regretted choosing life under any circumstances, including those.
Wow. What do you think about, because you've had so much success in Missouri, well then obviously everyone has different strategies and tactics in the pro-life movement.
Sure.
And sometimes everyone feels like they were a prophet called by God to do different things. Very hard to reason sometimes.
And yet in your case, it's true.
Please. There was recently a bill in Missouri, and I don't know too much about it, so I don't know if I should be asking this, but you probably know a lot about it, that I guess would have criminalized abortion, which I'm very pro criminalizing abortion in the sense that people who commit abortions after abortion should be legal, should be held responsible. But we very much see her as the second victim of this abortion industry. For 50 years, she's been told it's nothing but a blob of tissue, that she has to have abortion. It's her life or her baby's life. But this bill that was being introduced, I guess, in Missouri would have saw to it that women, mothers, would be put in jail, too, for seeking an abortion. And I had a bunch of people like DMing me, abolitionists who hate me apparently because I'm not pro-life enough. because pro-life movement came out against this bill. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your thoughts on that?
I haven't examined the language exactly. I think that I could understand the heart of it, because, in other words, if you go to the extreme truth, which is that abortion is murder, and if we're saying that that's murder, then someone's seeking that. You could see from a criminal lens. I think it's an extreme posture that probably has some absolute truth, but is not helpful to the cause, and certainly doesn't represent the work that Thrive is doing. So I'm not familiar enough with the language.
Yeah,
of the
we've
bill,
seen
and I
this.
haven't talked with the bill.
Yeah,
writer.
I saw.
But it's an extreme kind of shock thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then
Sorry,
and then the
Kristan?
view is that if you as a pro-lifer don't support, criminalizing abortion to the extent that it puts women in jail, then therefore you're not really pro-life. You're not really against abortion, which I think is certainly false. Pro-lifers can have
I agree.
differing strategies and tactics, but I think one thing that we are very much in agreement on is that she is a victim of the abortion industry, and very much seen as a second victim. Not to say that every woman who has an abortion is a victim, because I have met some women who in my time have said, I know exactly what I'm doing. It's a human baby. It has rights and I just don't care. But once again, I would say those women would be an exception, not the norm. And creating laws that say that, every single woman knows, I don't think is very helpful. I was just asking you because it just came up in Missouri of, now you have this other movement starting that I think we have to be very careful about, because you're just starting to get people across the country to pay attention to the pro-life movement, all the good work that we're doing, all the good resources that we offer, the sacrificial model of the pro-life movement for the past 50 years. But then if they hear that you want to put their grandmother or their mother in jail for having an abortion, even though there would be no law that could even be passed that could do that, because that would be, years after the fact, but that's what they hear. And it immediately shuts down the conversation about who we are as a pro-life movement and what our intentions are. And our intentions are to make abortion an unthinkable option. Make it unavailable. So yeah, that was just my one question. One last question for you, and I'll stop with the hard question. Sorry. What do you think is the biggest threat to your part of the pro-life movement? What Thrive is doing, the pregnancy centers, the women's health organizations. What do you think is your biggest threat right now?
There are still too many in the Pregnancy Resource Center movement that are not moving the needle towards providing more comprehensive women's health care services. And I think that is a real threat to the movement.
Okay.
Yep, because that is going to be something that is going to fall prey to cancel culture. And they're not going to have enough to defend the good works. So it's going to be very, very important that as we get more and more post-Roe, and the battle gets more and more fiery, that, in my personal opinion, pregnancy resource centers need to be providing more than a positive pregnancy test and an opinion, but they have to be moving into providing comprehensive women's health care, so that we can adequately compete, first of all, with Planned Parenthood, but also argue this case that we're just here to talk women into having their babies. It's too easy to fall prey to that kind of an accusation. So that would be my number one wish, is that within, say, 3 years, all pregnancy resource centers would be providing women's healthcare services as well.
Is that possible within 3 years? You think we can do it?
I know it was for us.
That's awesome.
I believe all things are possible when the quest is important enough.
I was waiting for that scripture quote. Where can folks, if folks are involved with the pregnancy center movement, organization, their community, hometown, and they're like, yes, I agree with you, we've got to offer more services, where would you think are the best resources they can go to get the treatments of care and the protocols and to get the legal documents, and where can you actually go and get that to say, here's how to transform our pregnancy center?
Yeah, so we're of course big fans of CareNet and Heartbeat. Both have very rigorous medical tracks that you can follow, and also NIFLA. We love NIFLA, and so those organizations have gotten it all figured out, and they've got the protocols. You said the word protocol. That's important.
Yep.
And of course, we would love to at some point be in your city and be offering the Thrive Plus model, which is our telehealth model, and so we can actually come into, let's say there's a pregnancy resource center that just doesn't feel equipped to move quickly enough into that role. You could bring Thrive Plus into your market, and we can handle the women's medical part through telehealth, and they can handle more of the resource side. So
That's an
there are lots of
interesting
cool ways to do
partnership.
it, but
So groups could, so a pregnancy center
yeah.
who's like, the board's weary of, we don't have the funds, we don't have the resources, we haven't identified the doctors, they could partner with you,
Yeah.
and you all could come in, run digital advertising, online work to start bringing people into a telehealth model.
Yeah. Yes, and at-home testing and that kind of thing. So
That's really cool.
that opportunity is just going to open up wider and wider for us.
So how do folks get in touch with you? Because that's an amazing idea.
Yeah, so just check us out. You can email me, of course, at, I'm sure there'll be something, but bvanmeans@thrivestlouis.org. And then, of course, you can always check us out on thrivealivestl.org. thrivealivestl.org. We'd love to talk with you.
That's awesome. Thank
Or
you.
come see us on June 24th
Oh, yeah.
at the conference.
Yeah, no, I was talking with Bridget before the podcast. I hope you all are joining us on June 24th at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial for the National Celebrate Life Day, the rally, and then the celebratory gala that night in Washington, D.C., where the pro-life movement is uniting to celebrate the end of Roe versus Wade, this thing that everyone said wasn't possible, that was totally possible, and then really pass the torch for where do we go next, and how are we as a pro-life movement focusing on ensuring equal rights for all, 14th Amendment protection for every human being, which will be our next, is our next big fight in a kind of our stepped phase to abolishing abortion throughout our land. So make sure you check that out at nationalcelebratelifeday.org.com and RSVP. It's free, but you have to RSVP because of the National Park Service. You get like a free lanyard or whatever. But I hope to see you there. And Bridget's coming. I think we just signed her up. And so you get to meet Bridget in person, have a conversation about Thrive, the amazing model that they're employing in Missouri. I encourage you to check out what Thrive is doing. Thank you, Bridget, for coming on today and sharing with us. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kristan.
Thank you all for tuning in. This was an awesome conversation. I cannot recommend Thrive more highly to you if you're interested in starting a pregnancy center, if you're interested in, transforming your pregnancy center into a medical model. Check out Thrive. Bye, everyone.